Well,
Voila.
all righty. Well, thanks so much for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to be down here. I think the last time I came to give a talk at the Smithsonian was a mere 30 years ago at the Entomological Society. And Ed Barrows was at that meeting. And he went back to Georgetown and said, let's look for this job application in this file. And I think I ended up getting my job at Georgetown because Ed saw my talk in entomology and activated my file. So it's a good thing to do to come down and give a talk down here.
Students, take note.
Anyway, it is a pleasure to talk to you all tonight. I know that I am preaching to the choir with an audience of plant aficionados, and I am happy about that. That is absolutely not the case when you're talking to a college classroom of freshmen who are largely pre-med and barely know that plants are alive, much less have any interest in them. And when I first came to Georgetown 30 years ago, to have a class with the P word in the title was the kiss of death. No one would come near it. And happily now, over the course of a few decades, with students getting more interested in plants and the environment and conservation, we have more courses that fill with students. But I think that plants still need a little PR on our college campuses, and so that's what I'm trying to do. And so I teach. I've taught a variety of courses at Georgetown, but I teach two courses that are pretty plant focused, and I've tried a few different kinds of activities that I'm aiming to get plant agnostic or plant blind students to open their eyes a little bit. And so I'm going to tell you about two of those classes, and along the way, talk a little bit about floral behavior and urban foraging. So you can get a little glimpse of what some of our flowers are up to and what we can eat all around the Smithsonian and in the city. And um, many of you have probably seen this book by Hale in Praise of Plants, and I love this particular figure. You can see the little person in the left saying, fantastic, all these animals. And there's a couple of mice and maybe a bird and a couple of crickets. And he says, plants make the landscape. Animals, including humans, use these landscapes as a framework for their lives. And yet, many of our students really just don't see plants. And so that's one of my big goals, is to help make plants a little bit more visible. So the two courses that I'm going to tell you a little bit about are called Plants and Society, which you can have the P word in it, but you need to have a little something else to moderate the P word, which is a class for biology majors. So they have some biology background. And we do a lot of projects, but I'm going to tell you about two in particular: pet plant projects and floral biographies. And then my other course is called Urban Foraging Ecology, and it's a 1-credit course with no prerequisites. So it attracts students from all across the university. So I have business and nursing and economics and Chinese and literature. And so that's kind of fun because they come with zero background. And so we can make a difference. And I'm going to talk about the foraging book that I have them make. And some of the themes that I think will come through in both of these courses are hands-on projects, independent exploration. Neither of the classes have a lab, so we learn about stuff in class, and then everybody goes out and their laboratory is Washington, D.C., or when they go home for Christmas to wherever. But so we look at stuff in class, we walk around campus and outside, but everybody has assignments that they need to do on their own. Close observation and drawing. I require the students to draw the plants. When they whip out their phones just to take pictures of them, I say, no, you can't tell if there's an axillary bud in your picture later on, so you really need to draw it. And I'm a terrible drawer, so I show them some of my chicken scratch drawings to try to normalize that. And then we spend a lot of time outdoors and we eat stuff. So these are all things that I think help with plant PR. So the pet plant project, do I need to? Bingo, thank you. The pet plant project that we do is based on an assignment that I had in my plant morphology class that Don Kaplan taught at Berkeley for my PhD in botany over 35 years ago. And I still remember the little okra plant that I grew from seeds and germinated and looked at the way that the plant grew and the allometry of the leaves. And so that has stayed with me this whole time. And so my pet plant project is based on Don Kaplan's project from a long time ago. And basically what I do is I give everybody, I raid my pantry and I give everybody some beans or lentils or some kind of fabaceous seed. And they need to look at it and draw it and familiarize themselves with it and then soak it and germinate it and plant it and grow it up to at least the 4-leaf stage. And they have to draw pictures at a minimum every other day. And they invariably kill their plants and they start over again because it turns out that you have to water plants and there's a lot of complicated things that happen. But so they grow their plants and they have to draw them. And then after they finish with that, they and a partner, having looked at their plants a lot and thought about them, come up with a question regarding plant behavior. And so then there's a plant behavior component of the project. And so I'm just going to show you a few of the kinds of things that students do and the kinds of insights that they develop. Oops. Where am I? Where's my? I've lost my cursor.
It's currently on the other.
Come back.
It'll come back.
Thank you. Okay. So here's a little book that Emily Caney made with the baby book of Mr. Pinto. And you can see that she's soaked Mr. Pinto, and this is a book for Mr. Pinto to look at. She's showing him that he had a very thick seed coat, and the embryo is the baby ewe, and then you can see the hypocotylar hook pulling the cotyledons up above the ground, and then she's up at the 2-leaf stage, and her book goes to the 3-leaf stage, the 4-leaf stage. Sadly, it ends with the death of Mr. Pinto, but she did a nice job in looking at everything and seeing what happened. And then Juliet had kidney beans, and she's got a little bit more detail here, but you can see the seed coat coming off and the lateral roots developing. As the plant germinates, you can see the cotyledons shriveling up and the leaves growing, and I believe that she got all the way to flowering. But clearly looking at the plants every day and seeing that these things that started out as food in the kitchen, that honestly, half the class, when I give them some beans and I say these are from my kitchen cabinet, the idea that they're actually alive is does not connect. And so to see a plant come out of the food from the cabinet is shocking. Okay, and then I'm just going to show you 2 behavior projects. So Lucy and Garrett did a project where they either left the cotyledons intact in a slightly germinating seed, or they removed one cotyledon, or they took away both cotyledons, and then they looked to see how well the plants grew. And you can see that having 2 cotyledons is better than 1, is better than none. This experiment comes out different ways depending on the timing and depending on how big the plant is before you remove the cotyledons. But at the get-go, the cotyledons really help the plants get a start above the ground. And Adrienne turned her plant upside down. There's a lot of upside down plants and upside down seeds in these experiments. And she sees that it's the shoot apical meristem that is sensing the gravity and turning and growing with negative gravitropism to right the ship. So these are just a few examples of the kinds of things that the students do to kind of get the idea that seeds are plants and that seeds are alive, plants are alive, and that they do stuff. The next big project that I do, which is a current obsession of mine, is this floral behavior project. And even as, you know, we think of flowers as beautiful, colorful, interesting shapes. But even as botanists, we might describe a flower as radially symmetrical, 5 petals, bright red, or something like that. And we tend to ignore the fact that the flowers are just active as can be, and they have a lot of behavior during the ontogeny of an individual flower. And they really are super dynamic. And over, I'm screen sharing, that's okay though, right? So I don't want to, can I just move that thing? Doesn't matter, you can read the words. So they're super dynamic, and from when the bud first forms at the apical meristem or the lateral meristem or wherever it's forming to when the flower opens, through its sexual phases to when it wilts and the seeds and fruits form, it's changing in many different ways. And floral ontogeny can last from hours to weeks, and the flowers, the whole flowers of the floral parts can change their sex expression, their color, pattern, orientation, position, shape, odor, their reward production. And they do this on a time schedule. And you can, for a lot of plants, you can tell what time of day it is based on what a flower is doing. So just as an example, I'm showing you Cleome, the spider flower from South America, but it's planted and kind of weedy in a lot of DC. And this is a total drama queen flower. And during COVID, sometimes our entertainment was to walk over to the neighbor's Cleome at 6:25, and the filaments reliably pop out of the petals at 6:30. And you could set your clock by this flower. So the buds and the flowers change color. There's a lot of positional change. The filaments and the carpel pop out in front of your eyes in the span of 20 or 30 seconds. They have variable sex expression. They have gynophores that grow out and make the ovary hang out way down below the flower. So there's a lot of stuff going on. So here's 6:22 p.m. You can see the filaments are just poised and ready to pop out of the purple upright flowers. 6:41, the deed is done. All of the filaments are out and the anthers are starting to release their pollen. The carpel comes out last after all of the filaments. It just plops out. And then you have to come back the next morning, and those magenta flowers have turned pink. The white buds have turned purple, and the filaments are already starting to pooch out. So this is an endlessly entertaining plant, but it turns out that lots of flowers do a lot of these kinds of things. They're not quite so speedy as Cleome, but they're doing a lot of stuff. So I mentioned color change. My doctoral dissertation was on flowers that change color to signal their pollinators. So I've spent a lot of time admiring flowers that are providing cues for pollinators, and they're saying, go here, don't go here, based on their color. And I worked a lot on lantana, and you can see that the lantana is letting this monarch butterfly. Now, the lantana is in fact training the monarch butterfly to go to the yellow flowers, where the monarch will find nectar and a receptive stigma and pollen. And it learns also, the plant also trains it to stay away from the magenta flowers, which are non-receptive and non-rewarding. And so it's kind of a win-win situation. The plants keep their older flowers beyond their reproductive lifetimes so that they make a big showy display at a distance. And then when the pollinator comes in, the flower says, poke your tongue in here, don't waste your time here. And the plants get efficient pollination service, and the pollinators get rewarded. And if the plant kept their older flowers and didn't have the close range cue, they risk making their pollinators mad And, if they go to a half a dozen flowers and they don't have nectar in them, they say, well, to heck with this plant, and they leave. And so truth in advertising seems to work in both directions. So anyway, lots of color changes. You see pawpaw, you see blueberries, asters, caesalpinia, and then some flowers from India, but lots and lots of flowers do it. And lots of pollinators learn. They're taught by the flowers to do what the flowers are bidding them. They can change their sex expression over time. On the left, we have Spring Beauty, and these flowers are male first, and you can see the really characteristic pink anthers sticking up in the top and releasing their white pollen, and the stigma lobes are fused together and nothing's happening. And then after the pollen is shed, then the filaments actively bend over. They don't collapse. They arch over and they lay the anther down like a little pink head on a white petal pillow. And then the stigma lobes spread and the flower changes from he to she. The 4 o'clock mirabilis does the opposite. And these plants are female first and then they're male when the flower opens at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The stigma is receptive, and then later on in the evening, the carpel, the style bends down and gets out of the way, and the anthers release their pollen. And then this clerodendrum, which I was on sabbatical in India a couple of years ago and really spent a lot of time looking at some of the Indian flowers and what they were up to. This is one of my favorites. So when you look at the bush, you see some flowers look like they're female and some look like they're male. So on the left, you see the one on the far left has just the carpel sticking out, and the one on the right, you can see the anthers. And if you look closely from the side, you can see that the carpel is arched over, but then the one on the far right, all you see is the female parts. And so what the heck happened? Where did the stamens disappear to? Did they fall off or what? And if you turn the flowers over, you see that the filaments coil up in a tight spring and just get the heck out of the way so that you don't see them at all. And this happens at night. So naturally, I had to come back every couple of hours to see what they were doing. And they start rolling up and then they tighten up. And by the morning, the male parts are completely tucked out of the way. Then there's a lot of plants have pretty elaborate choreography of their buds and flowers. And I chose 3 of our familiar native wildflowers that are doing all kinds of dancing and wiggling. So for the shooting star and the cucumber root, the buds are produced upward, and then the pedicel bends and the bud goes down and faces in the opposite direction. The flowers open facing downward. On shooting star, the petals open flat and then reflex back up. On cucumber root, the flowers just hang downward. And then after they're pollinated, the pedicel bends again and comes back up, and the fruits are produced upright. And columbine does the same thing. I'm not sure if the buds in columbine start out up or down, but the flowers open hanging down. And then you can see in the upper right, that one is sideways and it's on the way up, and the fruits are up. But so you can look at the orientation of the flower and figure out how old it is and which way it's going. And so almost any flower has got some kind of crazy choreography going on, some more obvious than others. I mentioned that flowers can keep time, and you guys are probably familiar with Linnaeus's floral clock. The idea being that different flowers open at different times, and so you could tell what time of day it was. And it sort of works. Weather and seasonality and latitude and cloud cover and all of those things kind of mess up the Swiss train schedule precision of this, but it works pretty well. And these are all flowers that I found on my walks in India. And that little Tradescantia comolina on the far left, if you see it open, it's between 5:30 in the morning and noon. And for a long time, I didn't know when it opened because 5:30 in the morning is not my time frame. But I had to catch a plane one day and I caught the flower opening, but it's closed up by noon. The quisquilus has a lot of stuff going on. That I could tell with pretty good certainty that that's between 10 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon, because the pink flowers are horizontal, but they're still pink flowers. When the buds that are moving up to the top open at 7 p.m., those flowers are white. By the next morning, the white flowers are pink, but they're still upright. And then at 7 in the evening, there aren't any more pink flowers, and all the pink flowers are hanging down and they are red. And there's a lot of odor stuff, a lot of changes in odor going on with the quisquilus too. And I showed you the mirabilis before, but that opens 4 or 5 in the afternoon. And the datura doesn't open until 6 o'clock. That was at my bus stop, and I could tell if I was getting the bus early or late if the datura was open. So a lot of timing stuff going on. So to help the students to appreciate that these flowers were doing a lot of stuff besides being red and with 5 petals, I had all of the students write a floral biography, and I intentionally had it be an autobiography and a first person narrative. So I wanted each student to choose a flower, and secretly I helped them choose flowers because some of them aren't very interesting, and so I helped them choose some that did a little bit more than others. And they had to spend a lot of time with their flower to see what it was doing. And I wanted them to look at the color and the position and the shape, the sexual expression, the interactions with other organisms. Were there visitors? Were they welcome or unwelcome? Did they have pollinators or herbivores, or or did somebody come step on them? What was going on? How long did they live? What happens when the party's over? Do they drop some of their petals? Do they drop the whole corolla? Do they keep everything? And then what happens at the end? What's the fruit look like? What the seeds look like? Are they dispersed? So this is a kind of a big assignment because they need to find a flower before it opens, because I wanted them to start in the bud and then to look throughout the whole life of the flower. So I piloted this at Azim Premji University in Bangalore, and the students there were game and drew beautiful pictures of some of the interesting tropical flowers. And you've got a Caesalpinia on the left and agave on the right. And they wrote nice narratives, and some of them were very chatty and fun and talked about the behaviors of their flowers and who they like to hang out with, and lots of nice detail. And then I'll show you a couple of the examples from around here. So Francesca looked at geranium or purple cranesbill, and she found a plant that had a bunch of buds that weren't open, and she followed them. And she showed up at sunrise to see when the flowers were opening, and she said, on bright days, I can reach full bloom in under an hour. On cloudy days, it could take me up to 3 hours to get a move on. I cut this down, but if the clouds come over and make it a little darker, the flowers could close up in the middle of the day, open again when the sun came out, and then they close in the evening. She says, I'm protandrous, which means that on my first day of full bloom, my stamens are mature and my anthers release pollen. And then by day 2, I stop producing pollen and allow my stigma to spread open and become receptive to pollen from visiting bees. And you can see that she's got a nice picture of the stamens on the left and the stigma spread on the right. And then she says, after my friends have come to visit, my priorities start to shift. I find myself in a family way, if you will. At this time, I allow my petals and stamen to drop, exposing my gynecium and retaining my sepals. And then she talks about how the ovary matures and the seeds form, and there's an explosive dehiscence, and these seeds are shot away. So she says, the carpels of the dehiscent fruit curl up and back to spring open and expel their small black seeds. The seeds are typically launched 10 to 30 centimeters away, allowing my children to make their own home somewhere else. It's hard to watch your children leave home, which I agree with, but I eventually regain my green color, and life goes on. So I think you can see that that Francesca has really moved away from purple flower with 5 petals to communing with her crane's bill. And then Michelle looked at the dogwood and she shows us that I'm not a loner. I'm always in a cluster with my family and surrounded by these four lovely bracts. So all those little green dotty things in the middle are in fact the flowers, and the things that look like petals are in fact bracts. And then Izo has shown us the separate male and female flowers on the holly. So we have monoecious hollies with male and female flowers with different floral parts. And so they really are looking carefully at these plants. And then I'm just going to show you one more. This is Megan's, and she's an amazing artist. When I first saw these, I thought, wait a minute, she's taking pictures of these. But they're really just beautiful drawings. And I had told that when tulips that you buy your tulips at Trader Joe's and they open up, and then in the evening they close up again, and the next day they open up and they're growing. So there's differential cell elongation on the upper surface of the petal in the morning, and then differential cell elongation on the outer surface in the evening. So they're getting longer. And so I said, it'd be fun if you measured them. And so she measured them every day, and they went from like 4.5 to 7 centimeters long. And then she has a picture of a girl keeps stopping by and holding a strange stick up to my tepals, I guess to measure their length. I'm not sure why she's doing that, but I appreciate the attention. So that's it for the floral biographies, but most of the students enjoy it. Some of them are not quite as excited to be visiting flowers 5 times a day, but they definitely get a little bit more of an idea of what's going on with the flower. Okay, so now we're moving from plants in society to urban foraging. And the subtitle of Urban Foraging and Ecology is From Pawpaws to Persimmons. And that's meant to foreshadow the idea of seasonality, because pawpaws usually drop miraculously the first day of class, which is the last week of August. And we still have persimmons starting in October, but into the end of the semester. So and this is a class, it's just one credit, as I mentioned, but instead of doing what people ordinarily do, which is have regular class meetings for 1 month in the semester and then be done, I just meet once a week for the whole semester so that we can span the phenology and see all the stuff that's happening. So why would anybody want to forage? Well, why would anybody not want to forage? But it's fun, and there's free, fresh food. It's pretty flexible. You could bite the end off of a honeysuckle and suck the nectar out, and that counts as foraging, or you could make a whole dinner, and that counts as foraging. You get to taste things, novel tastes and textures that you wouldn't ordinarily get to experience because they're not sold in the store. A little bit of independence during the pandemic. I actually got a lot of our chickweed and bittercress and chenopodium outside, and so I didn't have to go into the dangerous grocery store. An opportunity to learn more about plants and their biology and ecology, another way to follow and appreciate the passage of the seasons, and a way to engage with the natural world. So those are all the things that might appeal to English majors and French majors and business majors. But the other thing that we start thinking about with plants right away is that they are full of toxins, and some plants can be really poisonous. So you can't just go around eating any old plant that you find. You have to be able to identify the plant. And to be able to identify the plant, you have to be able to describe it. And to be able to describe it, you have to know what the parts are. And so all of a sudden, if you're not going to get sick, you need to be able to know the difference between opposite and alternate and whorled phyllotaxy. And you need to know the difference between simple and compound leaves. And so now things that would have been kind of boring to, if I said, okay, learn this, learn this, learn this, there's a reason to learn them. And oops. In fact, here's a practical application on day 1. Box elder and poison ivy look pretty much alike. They've got trifoliate compound leaves, but box elder leaves are opposite and poison ivy leaves are alternate. And so that is you can avoid plunging your arm into a patch of poison ivy to get some delicious plant that is growing underneath there, if you know that it has alternate leaves. So there's a practical motivation to learn this stuff, which might otherwise seem kind of boring. And again, seasonality, leaves and flowers and shoots in the spring, more fruits coming in the summer, and then seeds in the fall and seeds and underground storage stuff in the winter. And I tried to restrain myself, but I didn't do that good of a job. So I'm going to show you a bunch of stuff that you can eat around here. And I'm going to whip through it, but if you have questions afterward, ask. So we eat all the different parts of the plant. Another reason to learn plant morphology, because what the heck are we eating? So pretty much everything. And we learn the difference between tubers and bulbs and rhizomes and roots and figure out what's happening. And lots of good flowers. Red bud flowers, when the red buds are blooming, I have them in my salad or on my fruit every day. Black locust are delicious in salads, and they're also really delicious sauteed with edamame and onions and really yummy. Daylily buds are nice sauteed in a little olive oil, and the flowers are edible. And this is, in fact, the traditional Father's Day brunch in my house because they show up in the middle of June. And it is, I make yogurt mushed up with mulberries that are ripe at that time. And I spoon it into the edible cup of the daylily. This one looks like it's got some toasted beech nuts on top, and that's a 2-bite brunch. So my husband is perhaps not the biggest fan, but he's required to eat that every Father's Day. Lots of greens, purslane, allium flowers, lamb's quarters, green carpetweed malago is something I'd never seen before, but it's growing all over the campus lawn. All parts are edible. I'm here to tell you that all parts taste okay, but not great. So I'm not going out of my way for malago, but it's around. And then wood sorrel. I love the fruits and leaves of wood sorrel. We call the fruits Washington monuments. And we like to put Washington monuments in our salad and our sandwiches. I love lamb's quarters. I like it better than spinach, and my dog is a big lamb's quarter buff as well. But I collect it in the summer and I parboil it and freeze it so I can have it in the winter. Lots of summer berries. Wine berries are really nice. Short season, but really nice. Service berries are one of my favorites, and Casey Trees has started planting them all over Washington. Tons of service berries. Some years are fantastic, and you can stand under a service berry tree and pick a quart in 15 minutes. And some years, like last year, are 100% bust if the gymnosporangium fungus, which shares a host between it's like the cedar apple rust or the hawthorn apple rust. Basically, these little volcanoes erupt on the berries, and orange Cheeto powder comes out, and they're no good. And so some years there's just a little bit, some years it wrecks the whole crop. And I guess it depends on when the rains come in the spring. Pawpaws, of course, are the poster child for foraging because you can't buy them in the grocery store because they last about 5 minutes. But we planted a pawpaw thicket at the lab, and so we always have our own private pawpaw patch. And there's lots of places that you can get pawpaws, but they're nice to know where to find. And then Coosa dogwood was a surprise to me. It's pretty variable. It's planted a lot. There's a lot of them planted in Georgetown. You can crack the fruits open, and some of them have a really nice, sweet, creamy, custardy filling and they have some decent sized seeds. Some of them are grainy and not very good. And so you have to go taste all your you have to just sample the Coosa dogwoods. And when you find a good tree, remember where it is because it will be a reliable source. But they're fun to just eat on the street. And then, of course, Eastern persimmon is in the woods, and it's planted in my neighborhood. That tree on the left is on Van Ness Avenue, and it's a city tree, so I'm allowed. But as you all know, you can't eat the persimmons until they have bletted, which is a secondary ripening that gets where the bitter and astringent tannins break down. And if you eat a persimmon before it's bletted, you won't eat another persimmon for 10 years. But I take them and I mush them through a colander and freeze the pulp. And I made some persimmon bread out there with spice bush coming up next to season it. And that's a really nice combination. So I think you all know about spice bush. You can eat the fruits. You can or use them as a spice. People call it Appalachian allspice. The twigs make a nice tea all year round. And this year I'm experimenting with, usually I just dry the whole fruits. This year I'm experimenting with drying the seeds separately from the fruit coat and seeing if I like of the 3 different flavors, which one I like the best. Ginkgo around here. I discovered some of the great ginkgo trees when I was on jury duty down at the courthouse, and there are ginkgo trees planted all over the place, and there's some that with really nice big seeds. But if you can get past the vomit stink and boil them to get rid of some of the toxins, then you can saute them in a frying pan and they pop open and they have this beautiful green kind of gummy flesh inside. So they taste sort of like a gummy, starchy gummy thing with but that doesn't sound very good. They're nice, and you put a little olive oil and a little salt, and they're a popular bar snack in Japan. Something that I discovered just this year was edible that I wish I had found in the past is autumn olive, which is of course a terrible invasive weed and makes enormous amounts of fruit. And you can collect a quart in 10 minutes. And it makes the greatest fruit leather. It makes good jam too, but the fruit leather is just autumn olive. And I think I put in, a tablespoon of honey for a big pot of it. And it's tart and really nice and prized. So I have one more bag of autumn olives in my freezer and I'm saving it up, but I'm going to make some more fruit leather later on. But next year I'm going to get gallons. And I also had some beech nuts for you guys to try out there, but this was a big beech nut year. I think it was a mast year for beech nuts. Some years are total busts, and this was a really good year. And you can tell whether the beech nuts are okay or not by whether they're concave or they're these cute little pyramidal shapes with 3 sides. And if they're convex out, then the seeds are going to be full. And if they're concave, then don't waste your time because the seeds have all aborted. Last year and the year before, 100% bust. And this year, great crop. So you can toast these. You can eat them raw just when you're hiking in the woods. You can toast them. You can make beech nut butter, which is really good and labor intensive. But I think they're nice. And try some out in the other room if you haven't tried them yet. And then this was also a big Chinese chestnut year. Lots of really good Chinese chestnuts. I think they're as good as the European chestnuts. They're sweet and really nice. You have to be a little careful to get them and either boil them or freeze them quickly because there are weevils that also like them. And if you wait too long, you'll be eating not quite as much weevil as chestnut, but they do. And you can tell if they have weevils in them. So if you're a vegetarian and you don't want to be eating weevils, you can avoid them. But we're not the only ones that like them. The other thing that we have done is collect amaranth, which grows all over the place, and winnow amaranth seeds. Let me see if my little video works here. So there's a lot of chaff on the amaranth, and so we either blow or wait for the wind to get the chaff away. And I think last year with everybody doing this, we got about 4 tablespoons of amaranth. So it's labor intensive. Oops, that's not what I meant. Black walnuts. I have a black walnut nutcracker, which and you need a really long lever because they're so hard. You can drive over them in your car and you can't crack them. I mean, so you need a really big lever to get them. But really nice flavor, really different than regular black walnuts, regular walnuts. If you really go off the deep end, which I obviously have, you can make acorn flour from all different kinds of acorns. The ones on the far left are nice big sawtooth oaks, and the ones on the right are willow oaks. I call those cheddar cheese acorns. But you have to extract the tannins, and then you can make an acorn meal, which the nicest thing I can say about it is that it doesn't taste bad after you have gotten all the tannins removed, but it's never excellent, but you can make stuff out of it. And I've made nice cookies out of it. And finally, I just want to, this is mid-December. In our climate here, there's stuff available all year round. And the bittercress and the chickweed and the allium and everything show up again. And so there's lots of stuff that you can eat all year round. I didn't mention the air potatoes, which are the little airborne tubers from a Dioscorea, which are weedy in lots of areas, and those are nice to eat. So another thing that came across to the students is that foraging requires a lot of effort, and even though the food is free, you need to find it and identify it and collect it and clean it, and you need to do some of these verbs. Drying and winnowing and cracking and leaching and shelling and peeling and detoxifying and debugging and grinding and seeding. And so I challenged the students and myself last year to choose one of the plants that they were harvesting and see if they paid themselves minimum wage in DC, which is, we can round up to $20 an hour. It's 19 something, how much it would cost. And some things that seemed free were free. So you go get the chives or something out of the lawn everywhere and rinse them off, and no reason to buy chives or scallions anymore because it takes 2 seconds to rinse off. Beech nuts, if you collect them and crack them and process them at minimum wage, I'm probably a slow cracker, but I would have to charge $144 a pound for my beech nuts after I cracked them. But there are technologies that make things easier. So now I just want to mention a couple of non-food foraging things that we collected. We made dogbane cordage. We used milkweed fluff to stuff pillows. We made black walnut ink and dye. We wove cattails. We tried bayberry wax. That little blob of what looks like chicken fat on the top of the pot there is all of the wax that came from that little bowl of bayberries. So it's I'm not quitting my day job to make bayberry wax. I think we have enough for a birthday candle. And then some of the students tried enfleurage, extracting odor from flowers into oils and lotions. And one student this year made insect repellent from beautyberry leaves. So the dogbane, if you haven't made cordage from dogbane, this is a totally fun, easy little activity. And dogbane's everywhere. They're bast fibers, and you remove the pith, and then you end up with these fibers, and you twist it back on itself. So you twist it and double twist it, and this is just a little skinny piece of dogbane, and you can make a nice heavy rope. And this is actually a really practical thing if you lose your shoelace or something when you're out hiking in the woods. You don't need a piece of grass, won't do you any good, but you could make a little dogbane twine. That's not what I want. Okay, we used pokeweed berries for ink. We're going to dye some fibers with pokeweed berries because we're knitters. We made black walnut and indigo dyes, and this was we grew some of the indigo, we grew persicaria, and we used that for smashing indigo, but this is store-bought indigo, but we did do some nice black walnut dyeing. And now finally, every student, to sort of encompass all of the stuff that we have been looking at and running around and doing over the course of the semester, has to make a foraging book. It needs to have 20 edible plants, 5 poisonous or toxic plants, and 3 non-food foraged plants. And then there's a bunch of stuff that they're supposed to put in it. This year, I wanted them to have a hard copy and a digital copy, and I encouraged them to make the hard copy first, and then they could take pictures of it to upload. But if they didn't feel comfortable with that and they want to make something digital, then they needed to print it out. But I'm just going to show you a couple of them. This was a student who was a complete quiet student in class. She hardly said a word, but she got completely enraptured with all of these plants, and she made a beautiful foraging book. It was like 60 pages long, and she put in lots of pictures and described the plants with recipes, and she did a nice layout with her Jimson weed. She cut open the flower and looked at the seeds to see what was going on. So she really went above and beyond. And then I had another student who was an art major, and she asked if she could have a little more time because she wanted to paint all of her pictures. And so you can see on the beech nuts, she's saying convex, not concave. She's made some little prints with a pokeweed and telling you to be a little careful because it's poisonous. She's showing us how to do the dog bane, and tells us to make sure that you choose the right Coosa dogwood because they're not all great. So the students did a nice job putting together all of their observations in their books. And then at the end of the class, what we usually try to do is have a feast. And in 2022, I lost my mind, and we decided that we would do 24 hours of foraged food, starting with breakfast, and then we had a snack, and then we had lunch in the afternoon, and then we had dinner. And some of the highlights were the air potato gnocchi with 2 allium and chenopodium pesto and crispy fried air potato skins, and the bittercress and chickweed salad with roasted chestnut, fresh persimmon, beautyberry, wood sorrel, and amaranth were showstoppers. And of course, we served spice bush tea with spice bush sugar-rimmed glasses. This year, a lot of the students who promised me that they were over 21 made gin, and which basically involved taking vodka and throwing a few juniper berries in it, but they put other things into it, and we had a little gin tasting on the last day. We also, in 2022, I still had some cicadas in the freezer from 2021, so we had sauteed and chocolate-covered cicadas too. But we got a lot of calories out of the stuff that we collected, and at the bottom you can see we used very little non-foraged food, and nobody was hungry. And I was exhausted. I will never do it again. But it was really fun. So in all, we used 23 species of plants in 17 families, not counting the cicadas. And I would say that I think if I had to, I could support myself. I could keep myself alive for a month if I stockpiled. It would be boring, but I could do it. And I guess I just want to emphasize that there is a lot to eat. I live in the city, in Tenleytown on a paved block, and there's just a lot of food around. So here's everybody pounding and squishing and sorting. And here's some of what we ate. The burdock root, not a crowd pleaser, but calories. We ate the burdock root, and those are chocolate covered chestnut candies. Those were pretty spectacular. And on the bottom right is the amaranth crackers with roasted beech nut butter. Those are the $100 peanut butter crackers. because of the amount of time that they take. But lots of nice things to eat. So coming back to the themes that we started out with, hands-on projects and independent exploration, close observation and drawing, and time outdoors. I think all of these things were pretty effective ways to get students to pay attention to plants and to see them as living creatures. The growing the beans and the looking at the behaviors really helped them to see that they were alive and worthy of their attention and respect. I think that, and it certainly didn't work for all the students, but a lot of the students, I think, were able to overcome their plant blindness a little bit. They paid more attention to the natural world. They had fun showing their friends and their roommates what they had found. They taught their grandmas how to use iNaturalist. Another thing that I hadn't expected was that one of my assignments was go interview grandma about whether she foraged when she was a little girl in Mexico or Inner Mongolia. The grandma from Inner Mongolia sent us the recipe for pickled allium flowers that have apples in them, which are delicious. So there was some sort of intergenerational stuff. And then we also read a bunch of stuff about the history of foraging. And so the history students were interested in some of the kind of cultural, social stuff and the foraging with the slaves and the rules for foraging and the laws, what's legal, what's not legal, and how there was sort of social engineering related to foraging. So I'm just going to read you what one student wrote last week, which warmed the cockles of my heart. She says, the first thing that comes to mind, I asked them to reflect on if their ideas about plants had changed, is how much more I notice everything now. When I'm walking around, I actually pay attention to the plants and landscape around me, noticing the arrangement of the leaves or little shifts in color. Before this class, I definitely moved through the world on autopilot and would barely look at what was right in front of me. Now I often find myself stopping in the middle of the sidewalk to examine something, pull out my phone to double check an identification, or just pause to admire a plant I have seen many times but never really seen. This change has made my day-to-day life feel slower, calmer, and more intentional. I feel more connected to my surroundings, and it has helped me feel grounded in moments when I'm overwhelmed. Paying attention in this way has made the world feel bigger and more full of wonder. So couldn't ask for more than that as a teacher, to have students feel like they look at the world in a different way. And with that, I am done and would be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you. Curious, any thought on tracking some of these students? Like this class, we often talk, like, I think everybody in this room and everybody online would say at some point in their life, there was an invitation to fall in love with the plant world. And I think your class does that, which is congratulations and thank you. But it would be interesting to follow some of your students to see, impact over time. And I'm wondering if when you were working with students in India, whether or not there were any, were they closer to the earth than our Georgetown students, or they were just students and it was the same?
Okay, so first part about the tracking, I don't do any active tracking, but I appreciate passive tracking. So I get letters from students every once in a while who wrote and said, I was in such and such a place and I saw this and I thought of you and I wanted you to know that I'm doing this or that, and I don't get them very often, but I love it when I do. And then in India, I sort of had expected that the students would be a little more tuned in, and they were not. And this is an urban campus, but I mean, one thing that sort of amazed me in India was how close everybody is to the plant product. I mean, so the guy at the corner of my block was the bamboo guy, and he was out there with his machete and chopping up the bamboo and making blinds like that out of bamboo, with moving rocks back and forth and putting strips of bamboo and making baskets. And we ate on bamboo, on banana leaves, and I mean there was a lot of more plant stuff that was a lot closer, and we have, 6 steps of processing in between. So I sort of thought that maybe they would be a little more tuned in, and I did not find that.
Can you provide your contact information, please?
Yes, I'm at Georgetown University, Weiss M at georgetown.edu, or just look up Martha Weiss at Georgetown.
Okay. And I have a question in terms of do you ever find that there are negatives uh, with foraging? For instance, right now there's a movement to create what people call edible forests. And there, you mentioned both natives and invasives. For instance, your what was it? Air potatoes are highly invasive. And I was wondering whether you have dealt with the risk of spreading invasives by creating places where people can forage, and also whether people who forage might then tend to go out in natural areas and conduct destructive foraging.
So that's a great question. And one thing that I didn't talk about at all, but that we spend a lot of time talking about in class is responsible foraging. And we talk about native plants and non-native plants, and the difference between pulling up garlic mustard or picking autumn olive fruits, and people going out with a shovel and decimating ramps and ginseng and native plants that there's a market for. And so we talk a lot about the difference between those kinds of things, and um, how one needs to behave with the native plants. And we read a couple of chapters of Braden Sweetgrass, and Robin Wall Kimmerer has some nice thoughts on responsible foraging. The first part of your question, the food forest thing, I think I don't worry about, or I haven't worried about food forests spreading invasive plants, because that will, I know Lincoln Smith, but uh, and I know he's got his food forest going in Bowie, but I don't think he's going and sprinkling air potatoes around. I know that he is grafting some Asian persimmons onto native persimmon rootstock, but it all seems kind of contained, and he seems to know what he's doing. Um, I guess like anything, you want to know what you're doing and behave responsibly.
Thank you. A
Mhm.
wonderful talk.
Thanks. Yeah.
So obviously the focus is on plants, but I did see a few edible mushroom photos in there. Can you talk a little bit about to what extent you integrated mycology?
For the class, 0. I said to the class, we're not doing mushrooms. And well, I mean, honestly, the plants could kill you as much as the mushrooms could kill you. I realize that it's a little bit hypocritical, but I'm trained as a botanist, and I didn't forage for mushrooms for most of my life. And then I took a fungus course from Serenella, and I learned a half a dozen mushrooms that you can't mix up with anything else that I feel comfortable foraging. But I didn't want to open the door for the students to start, I mean, unless they have taken a class that would be taught by somebody who knows more about mushrooms than I do. I didn't want them to mix up their what's the stinking orange oyster that looks a little bit like
Sure.
yeah, well, no, there's a stinking orange oyster that I saw in Rock Creek the other day that piqued my curiosity, but it wasn't a chicken of the woods and it wasn't a jack-o'-lantern. Stinking orange oyster, I don't know what it is. But anyway, I didn't want to open the door for them to start collecting mushrooms without knowing them. And I felt like I could guide them with the plants. There's also a rule that I should mention, that unless after we've seen it in class and they feel like they can identify it that's okay. But if there's something that they find that they identify that they think is something edible, they have to text me or send me a picture before they eat it. And we almost had a little disaster in Liechtenstein because the first time I taught the class was online. It was during COVID. And my students were in San Diego and Manhattan, Kansas, and New York and Washington, D.C., and Liechtenstein. And lots of weeds grow all over the place. But so we had learned about chestnuts, and my Liechtensteinian student said, "Oh, I'm so excited I found chestnuts. I'm giving my parents chestnuts for dinner tonight." And I said, "Show me the fruit, show me the leaves." And they were horse chestnuts, which are toxic. You wouldn't get that far because you can't roast them in the same way, but it was a little scary. So I do want them to, I mean, I don't want anybody to die on my foraging watch. So even though plants can kill you just the same as mushrooms can, I feel like I know my plants a little bit better than I know my fungus. Any other questions out there in Radio Land?
I had one. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I was reading just a little while ago that in Sweden, until a few decades ago, the school kids needed to create a herbarium a la Linnaeus. And so, surprise, no plant blindness. And I'm just wondering, do you ever feel like you're just doing a lot of remedial botany when really we all should be learning a lot earlier in life about plants?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I'm the semester starts tomorrow, and I'm teaching a sophomore class to students who are largely pre-med. And honestly, the number of times that I have heard, "Why do we have to learn about plants? Doesn't she know we want to be doctors?" Um, uh, uh, it fills me with a little bit of dread and apprehension, but what I'm teaching, what I've decided to teach these kids in this class, in which is a process class, so you can do anything you want for content, is we're doing photosynthesis and plants. And it's not going to go over too big, but I do feel like it's really important for them to know about, and they can learn about writing grants and interpreting graphs about plants just as well as they can about cancer. So that's what we're going to do. But yes, I totally agree that we should be doing this stuff in kindergarten and elementary school, and it should not be a surprise to a college senior that a bean or an acorn is alive.
Well, and what percentage of our medicines originally came from?
Most.
Thank you. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. So wish me luck as I head into the semester.
Time for maybe another question?
Yeah, a silly question maybe. Is there any use to be made for liriope that is horribly invasive in my yard, and I wish I had something to do with it besides curse it and try to dig it up?
Not a clue. I mean, we have a liriope problem as well. There's little tubery things underground too, and you have to get those
Oh,
up.
yeah.
I mean, I've never heard that they're edible, so I don't know. I would not advocate that, Rob. Send some to Rob to try, and if he's still okay. I will say that what they call fairy potatoes, spring beauties have a little tuber that is called a fairy potato. But I love spring beauties so much that I never like to dig them up to get their fairy potatoes, even though there's a lot of them.
It would take so many.
Yeah.
Well, Martha, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. Everybody online, everybody here tonight. Happy New Year. We look forward to next month. We challenge you. We have a January challenge, which is, as I mentioned earlier, next month is new member month. I think in our 125th year, we would like to increase the number of people that know about the Botanical Society of Washington. It shouldn't be a secret. It's an amazing thing. So think of somebody you would love to know about the Botanical Society and invite them next month, even if you can't come. Send us an email and let us know they're interested, and we'd love to have them. So thank you, everybody, and a special thank you to Gabe tonight for the technology. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Great.
Yeah.